Good morning, friends, and welcome once again. Let us continue our discussion from the last class. If you recall, in the last class, we talked about the fiction of Indian diaspora and all its key contributors. Um, we discussed how the fiction of Indian diaspora of late has become one of the most important aspects of contemporary literature, and it is a rich body of literature with multiplicity of voices and experiences that are shaping the contemporary human sentiments. And again, as Indians, it's very important for us to understand the psyche, the resilience, the challenges of the Indians overseas. So, this body of fiction is a very important contribution to contemporary literature. And as I said, any attempt at homogenizing this body of fiction would be limiting because it provides us with vast possibilities, and it is also a big experimental ground for all the authors belonging to this particular arena. Um, Although sometimes we tend to simplify the experiences of the diasporic community and tend to homogenize them, um, all of us need to realize one thing, that the experiences of every individual are different, and they need some different kind of approach to understand or narrate it. So when we look at this body of fiction, we'll realize that there is multiplicity of narrative techniques, and that's why I am going to talk about narrative techniques in Indian diasporic writing, not any particular technique. So, the first thing that we notice in this body of literature is what is called multivocality. Multivocality itself talks about the presence of multiple voices, perspectives, and narratives within a text or discourse. So, it may be a single text, but then it will not be a single voice. So, several voices, sometimes presenting contrasting realities, will emerge out of a single text. So, there is multiplicity of voices, and there is presentation of contrasting realities, because it's not always possible that the two people placed in similar circumstances will react to that in a similar manner, or will have this same kind of experience. Again, another very important aspect of this particular literature, and in a way we can say that this is the literature that is coming from the margins. Why? Because these diasporic communities are minority in the host countries. So, the literature produced by them may be said to be coming from uh, the margin, and margin is always voiceless and seeks to voice itself. So, the writers of this category, and again, it doesn't come as a surprise that we have most of the writers as women. And again, they are voicing the silences of women, the working class migrants, or marginalized, uh, alienated groups. So, this is again a very important aspect of the fiction of Indian diaspora. And again, since the diasporic people, although they are loosely connected to each other, uh, in case of Indian diaspora, since most of the people are coming from different states of India, and India has multiplicity of languages, cultures, cuisines, and everything. So these people may not be forming a homogeneous whole. Nonetheless, they always try to come up with a collective memory of their homeland, and they construct it as a marker of their Indian origin. So, this kind of multiplicity of voices is achieved through a polyphonic structure, as Mikhail Bakhtin talks about, in which we find that there are contrasting voices in a collective story. So there are different characters, and they are all having their own different experiences and different voices. So it accounts for a polyphony of voices. There are multiple narrators. Mind it, this kind of story is not narrated all the time from the perspective of a single character, but sometimes we'll find that there are multiple narrators, and their perspectives are also not fixed, they keep on shifting. And then again, one of the other aspects of the narrative technique of this body of fiction is intergenerational storytelling. So we find that it's not the story of one individual, one community, or one time frame. It sometimes is the story of several generations of people, and their experiences obviously are different from each other. There are time shifts, there are epistolary invoices, and we find that this body of fiction is rich in uh, diverse experiences and voices, and we can find it reflected in almost all the major writers of Indian diaspora. In particular, I can mention Jhumpa Lahiri, Bharati Mukherjee, and Amitabh Ghosh. Then there is another technique that is used, uh, magic realism. All of us know that it originated in Latin America as a strategy to blend realistic elements with magical or dreamlike elements, and it was introduced by Franzo, the German critic, in 1952. So we find that the Indian diasporic writers, because this provides them a safe haven. Sometimes the characters, while in a very troubled state of mind, enter this magical realist world and forget about their pains and sufferings for that particular moment. As we see in Namesake, when Osima Ganguly is left alone and is expecting the birth of Gogol, uh, she starts, thinking about life of her parents at that point in time, uh, in India, and that magically erases her pulsating pain and acute sense of loneliness in uh, America at that point in time. So, temporarily, she forgets all about her pain, and she seems to be part of that magical world inhabited by her parents with their daily routines. Again, there is lot of use of fantasy, uh, which acts as an extended metaphor, externalizing the internal conflict in the protagonist's life. So what happens, many a time we find that the characters who are not able to cope up with the harsh realities of life, they enter the world of fantasy, and that gives them uh, relief as well as some kind of hope. As Salman Rushdie says, and he has made beautiful use of magic realism, especially in Midnight's Children, that we'll discuss in some detail later on. So I quote Rushdie, who says, magic realism actually works for the magic to be rooted in the real. It's both things. It's not just a fairy tale moment, it's a surrealism that arises out of real. So, this magic realism is also not completely out of sorts, rather, it blends the real and the fantastical, and this certainly shapes the experience or alters the thinking of the characters. Again, Khan, uh, says that diaspora writers characters make use of magic realism to escape to a world of fantasy, for it provides them pleasure, relief, and an escape from the excruciating pain they experience in an alien land. So, as I said, this magic realist technique becomes a kind of shield for these diasporic characters from their immediate suffering and pain, and it keeps their hopes and spirits alive and kicking. Again, we always find that our past never leaves us, and more so when our present is not as pleasant as our past. So, again, you see how much we will talk about our past or how much we will miss our past also partly depends on the kind of present experiences we are going through. So, let's say some people who have a very tragic past and their present is, very happy and successful, such people tend to, uh, forget their past because that is very, painful for them. But again, the question comes whether it is possible for somebody to completely root out the past experiences. We always find that since the diasporic people have moved away from their familiar settings, from their own country to a different country, and are living in different circumstances with new realities to cope up with, their past never quite leaves them. It haunts them as ghosts, visions, or surreal experiences. And again, these ancestral spirits become symbols of heritage and continuity for them, and they continue to realize their presence in their lives. It also accounts for ambiguity and uncertainty on their part, because their identities are always perplexed or ambivalent. So, but then it also allows exploration of alternative realities and the subversion of dominant narratives. So, when we talk about the fiction of Indian diaspora and its narrative technique, we find that this technique is very rich in the exploration of complex uh, experiences of humans, and it has layers. So, for instance, we can talk about Midnight's Children by Salman Rushdie, which has been considered one of the pioneering, or one of the let's say the most important works of Indian diaspora. Again, another aspect of the narrative technique of diasporic writings is their non-linear storytelling. Obviously, we know that life is made of fragments, and there is no linearity when it comes to recounting our experiences. So there is always going back and forth in time while detailing our experiences based on our memory. So most of these novels, when we look at their narrative uh, technique, we find that they are non-linear narratives. So rather than chronologically talking about or capturing the experiences of their characters, they talk in episodes, and we find that there is a frequent back and forth movement. So the techniques that are used as flashbacks. So suddenly we find that the character refers to events that occurred in the past, or starts foreshadowing the future events, so that is flash forwards. So and again, there are multiple timelines, there is not one. So we have a curious mixture of past and present, uh, or uh, using parallel storylines in different time periods. Sometimes we find that there are several stories that are going on parallel to each other in a single story. So there are multiple timelines, and these are all non-linear narratives. Why? Because the memory does not follow any kind of linear pattern. For example, the works of Jhumpa Lahiri, Salman Rushdie, Bharati Mukherjee, Anita Desai, they are all non-linear narratives. Then there is another very important and interesting aspect of the fiction of Indian diaspora: multilingualism. And this is rightly so. We all know that India is rich in languages, and the writers of Indian diaspora, other than having their own mother tongues, they also speak many languages. So we find that their thought process is expressed through a multiplicity of languages, not in one language. So there is always a keen tussle between inner monologues and spoken language. As we all know, we basically try to think and conceptualize in our own mother tongue, and when we speak in a language that is required of us. So there is always this kind of inner monologue versus spoken language kind of situation, when we find that, let's say, a Bengali character thinks in Bengali but speaks in English. So and again, this becomes a common habit that we go for code switching, like we alternate between languages. So we use the English language and our own mother tongue simultaneously, or one by one. Um, we also have many untranslated and untranslatable words, experiences, and emotions. And we find that mostly our slangs, they come in our own languages, because we are born with them and we attach certain meaning to them. So there are a lot of untranslated words and phrases, um, especially and directly derived from the source language. Then again, the texts that are presented to us, they have polyglossia. That means there are multiple languages in one text. So even if the text has been written majorly in, let's say, English language, it does have references and sprinklings or spicing up from some other languages as well. And then again, there are palette texts and footnotes. Uh, for example, you can find them in the works of Amitav Ghosh, Chitra Banerjee Divakaruni, Kiran Desai, and Rohinton Mistry. And again, as I said in my earlier class as well, this body of fiction is very closely and intimately informed by the autobiographical and semi autobiographical elements, because the writers, and we talked about some category of writers. The first category that we talked about was the category of those diasporic people who are not professional writers, yet they felt a need to talk about their experiences. So, their unique experiences in a host land or a different land made them think and share their experiences with people. So it was by accident or by design that they became writers, and whatever they talked about was not something cooked or something imaginary, rather it was something that they had experienced themselves or as a group. So, when we look at this body of fiction, and I also made mention of one of the novels of Bharati Mukherjee, The Tiger's Daughter, in which the story runs parallel almost to the life of the author herself. So, for any perceptive reader, it's not that difficult to find out the autobiographical or semi autobiographical elements in diasporic texts, because most of the writers of Indian diaspora are also part of Indian diasporic community and share lot of experiences or collective experiences of the entire group. So, with semi autobiographical elements, we find that the fiction is based on author's own life. But yes, of course, since it's a fiction, the writers fictionalize characters, events, and settings. But with some effort, we can still identify them. And all of us know that the purpose is communicating the experiences and intricacies of real life people, although in a fictional garb. So, we find that most of the authors draw heavily from their personal experiences of migration, their own struggles with cultural dislocation, and this also lends a certain degree of authenticity and emotional depth to whatever they are narrating, because if they have not experienced it, probably they will not empathize, or they may be cooking stories that will not be, what we can say, convincing to readers like us. So again, we find that these autobiographical or semi autobiographical experiences or personal experiences enable these authors to explore complex themes like identity, belonging, immigrant experience, dislocation, displacement, alienation, and so on and so forth. And this is very prominently, again, uh, this has been very prominently displayed in the works of Bharati Mukherjee, Rohinton Mistry, Bikram Seth, Jhumpa Lahiri, and others. Then, as I said earlier, these narratives don't have a single voice, and they don't talk about the experiences of one particular individual. So, they are also intergenerational narratives, and they explore the experiences of migration, cultural transmission, and identity. For example, if you look at Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri, you will find that Namesake is not the story of Ashok and Asima Ganguly, the first generation migrants alone. It is also the story of, let's say, Gogol, Sonia, Mosumi, and many others belonging to next generation. Fine. So we find that this body of fiction explores the experiences of migration, cultural transmission, and identity over an extended period of time, and highlights continuity, conflict, adaptation, and memory, revealing evolving and disrupting relationships between first generation immigrants and their descendants. So, there is a very keen conflict in the value system, in the experiences, in the aspirations of the two or three or different generations of immigrants. As I just uh, quoted an example of the namesake, we find that there is a keen tussle between the parents and the protagonist, because the protagonist finds his own native culture too restricting and too limiting, and again it leaves him completely confused, while the parents, to the best possible, try to transfer their own culture, their own traditions, their own cuisine to their children. So this is one of the major aspects of the fiction of Indian diaspora. We find lot of intergenerational conflict. You can very well say that intergenerational conflict is nothing new. It happens everywhere in all the societies. It happens back home as well, because the different generations think differently. But still, what happens in a diasporic condition is that the you know the parents try to maintain their active ties with the motherland. They try to create a little India within their four walls, and want their children to abide by the codes of Indian living, while the children encounter a different world altogether outside their home. And that is why their conflict is intensified in a foreign land, and that is what makes it different from the intergenerational conflicts back home. Then again, uh, this intergenerational thing is not only conflicting, sometimes it is complementing as well, because one generation transfers the myths, folklores, or family histories and ideologies, or family secrets, and shared identities and collective memories of violence, trauma, or nostalgia to the next generation. So, there is also a sense of continuity. So, sometimes we find that the first generation may have suffered trauma, violence, conflict, and because of that they may have migrated from their own homeland. Their second generation kids born out of them in let's say the host country um, had none of the experiences that their parents had, but through them they also experience that trauma and violence, and they feel uh, it intercepting their lives. So, again, as I said, the namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri is a very important narrative when it comes to talking about intergenerational narrative. In another class, we will talk about namesake in some detail. Another aspect of the diaspora narratives is their intertextuality. So they refer to other texts. They always make references and echoes, or they respond to other literary works, historical events, myths, religious texts, and cultural narratives, and it accounts for both continuity and richness of detail of these texts. So we always find that every text has two axes, a horizontal axis connecting the author and the reader of a text, and the vertical axis which connects the text to other texts, as Christopher says. And this is very much evident in most of the diasporic writings. This intertextuality also helps to challenge the dominant narratives by creating post colonial resistance, preserve cultural heritage, and by exploring the hybrid nature of diasporic identity. I will elaborate on this when we talk about, theorizing diaspora in the next class. We find intertextuality prominently being exercised and demonstrated in the works of Salman Rushdie, Jhumpa Lahiri, and Amitabh Ghosh. Um, they are incorporated through mythology and folklore reinterpretations, rewriting of canonical texts, embedding with historical events and political discourses, biblical, religious, and spiritual references, multilingualism, and code switching, as we talked about, through metafiction and self referential storytelling. So, these are some of the techniques, of intertextuality that are used by these authors for lending, authenticity and continuity, and again, um, providing a frame to their storytelling. So this is about the narrative techniques in fiction of Indian diaspora. Friends, we will talk about the you know um, theoretical concepts that might help us understand this body of fiction or unravel the mysteries it contains underneath. So, apparently, every story looks like a simple story, but then, as students of literature, we are not satisfied with the primary meaning of a text. Rather, we are looking for the range of secondary meanings, or the reality under the surface that it contains. So, friends, we'll be talking about that in the next class. You can refer to these works for your, uh, you know, uh, more understanding in this particular area. You can, refer to these uh, works. So, thank you very much again for your company and for your patience. And we continue this discussion in the next class. Thank you.